Thank you very much, Acting Speaker. And I too rise to speak on the Justice Legislation Amendment Anti-Vilification and Social Cohesion Bill 2024. And from the outset, Acting Speaker, can I thank the Member for Malvern and the Shadow Attorney-General for the power of work he has done on this piece of legislation on behalf of the opposition, making sure that we have a very well-informed position and are well-briefed on the risks this piece of legislation poses to the wider community. Acting Speaker, can I begin by talking about the need for reform? And it is the case that the need for reform in this area of law is clear. And we accept that the current set of anti-vilification laws need to be reformed to provide greater protections against incitement and hate in this state and to enhance social cohesion in Victoria. My colleague, the Member for Malvern, has already pointed out that we've only had 4 convictions under the current system. And we know, sadly, there have been numerous serious incidents in this state that would fall under this area of law. And it's been particularly concerning, Acting Speaker, to see the appalling rise of that ancient and persistent hatred of the Jewish people, the spike in anti-Semitic sentiment, and indeed across this state and across this nation is of deep concern to the Coalition. I note the work of the Legal and Social Affairs Committee, who provided a roadmap for reform in this space. But unfortunately, the bill before us does deviate significantly from the recommendations of that committee, which I will return to shortly. Acting Speaker, I want to start by outlining the parts of the bill that we do support, because as I said earlier, the Coalition absolutely accepts the need for reform in this area to strengthen protections and improve social cohesion. We acknowledge the need to modernise this area of law to better protect those in our society who are subject to unacceptable, hateful and prejudicial behaviour. And that's why we support the measures in this bill that expand the protected attributes under the Act. Unfortunately, there have been a number of vulnerable people who, because of a particular attribute or belief, can be and have been subjected to hatred and incitement on the basis of that attribute or belief. Currently, only the attributes of race and religion are protected. The Coalition supports the measures contained in this bill to expand that list of attributes to include disability, gender identity, sex, sexual characteristics and sexual orientation. And I note that these attributes and characteristics are protected under the Equal Opportunity Act, and so aligning the anti-vilification law with these definitions is sensible reform. So again, Acting Speaker, I want to say very clearly the Coalition supports these measures to protect potentially vulnerable members of the community and to improve social cohesion in Victoria by expanding the list of protected attributes. However, Acting Speaker, we do have genuine areas of concern in this piece of legislation, and that relates to the political purpose defence. Unfortunately, despite our unambiguous support for the expansion of protected attributes in this bill, there are some measures contained in it that the Coalition cannot support. The creation of a genuine political purpose defence to the criminal charge of incitement is, in the words of my colleague, the Member for Malvern, a green light to incitement and a step in the wrong direction. I note that the Legal and Social Affairs Committee did not make any recommendation to suggest that a political purpose defence was necessary. I also note the opposition to this measure by several faith groups, including the Jewish Community Council of Victoria and the Islamic Council of Victoria. Indeed, let me put on the record some of the concerns of the Jewish and Islamic communities. The Jewish community are concerned that simply substituting the term Israel or Zionist for Jew will avail anti-Semitic protesters of the political purpose defence on the basis that attacking Israel or Zionism is a political activity. The Jewish Council of Victoria wrote of this concern, and I quote, that this defence does not become a catch-all measure that renders these new laws unworkable. As Mark Dreyfus, the Federal Attorney-General, has said, the label Zionist is used, not in any way accurately. When critics use that word, they actually mean Jew. They are not really saying Zionist. They're saying Jew because they know they cannot say Jew. So they say Zionist or words such as Zio or Zeo. Similarly, Acting Speaker, the Islamic Council of Victoria has warned that the misuse of this defence has the potential to allow individuals openly preaching or exciting hate to evade responsibility by hiding behind a claimed political purpose. This new defence will provide legal protection for all manner of hate speech, creating a loophole that completely undermines the other worthy measures that are contained in this bill. Mike Burgess, the Director-General of ASIO, in his annual threat assessment last year, highlighted the concerning rise in politically motivated violence in this country. He says that more Australians are embracing a more diverse range of extreme ideologies, and that politically motivated violence is now one of Australia's principal security concerns. Given we know political motivations are driving much of the extremist sentiment in this country, it is inconceivable that the Labor government would seek to provide a political defence to incitement in this bill. According to the Executive Council of Jury, Acting Speaker, in the 2 months following the devastating attack of 7 October by terrorist organisation Hamas, we saw a 738% rise in anti-Semitic incidents compared to the same period last year. And unfortunately, this steep and ugly rise in anti-Semitism has been particularly apparent here in Victoria, where we have seen protests and violence conducted in Jewish neighbourhoods outside synagogues designed to intimidate the Jewish community here in Victoria and target them for their faith. And we're now seeing this anti-Semitism spilling over into some of the most atrocious acts of violence and hatred, such as the firebombing of the synagogue right here in Melbourne. And we've heard anti-Semitic chants in this place, Acting Speaker, not to mention the intimidatory acts we have witnessed targeting Jewish schools. Schools here in Victoria, here and out in Melbourne, like Mount Scopus, where there is now a fear of students, of parents and staff at those schools. For that reason, Acting Speaker, we simply cannot support any bill, no matter how well-intentioned, that effectively creates a legal cover to allow hate speech to exist and potentially even grow because of this political purpose defence. Acting Speaker, another area of concern that we'll touch on briefly relates to the civil anti-vilification provisions contained in this bill. In particular, the harm-based civil protection measures in this bill introduce a highly subjective element of the law. Rather than the test being what a reasonable person would find to be hateful, the test under this bill will be whether a reasonable person with the protected attribute would be reasonably likely to find hateful. What this means in practice is that different groups of people with different protected attributes will now have different protections under the law. The introduction of a subjective element to vilification laws means courts must assess the perspective of a person with the attribute instead of perspective of a reasonable person. And I give an example of the Christian faith. That will come down to whether someone is a Catholic member of the faith, the Church of England, Baptist, Presbyterian, and can drill down even further into those faiths. Concerningly, the courts will also need to assess how sensitive groups and subgroups are in order to assess whether particular conduct is illegal. This is an affront to the foundational principle that all Victorians are treated equal under the law in this state. It is erosion of the fundamental principles that underpin our legal framework, and the Coalition opposes this attempt to unpick the fabric of that foundation. Acting Speaker, the member for Malvern, the Shadow Attorney-General, has moved a reason amendment, pointing to the fact that we actually focus on how to improve social cohesion here and now, and that is in relation to move-on laws. This is a missed opportunity to strengthen protections for vulnerable Victorians, to build social cohesion and ensure lines in the sand can be effectively drawn against some of the more horrid incidents we have witnessed in this state in recent times. It is a missed opportunity to look at ways we can actually strengthen the existing laws to better tackle antisocial behaviour and vilifying behaviours. And that is the move-on laws. It needs to be a must for any discussion on the table when it comes to improving social cohesion in this state. The Coalition stands ready to work with the government. We have introduced a private members bill to introduce those laws, to put them back in place so that the police have the power and stop the weekly disruptions in the CBD, the weekly disruptions when it comes to the protesters, making it hard for families to come into the CBD, putting at risk this last year the Maya Christmas windows, Australia Day here in the CBD. Acting Speaker, unfortunately, the government completely missed the mark with this bill, and we cannot support laws which will only protect hateful speech and encourage more of it.